This video starts my series on the Westerlands, as voted on by my lovely supporters on Patreon. I will be breaking this into several parts. This video will cover up to Lan the Clever. Temperate and fruitful, the Westerlands, as you can probably guess from their name, are on the west side of Westeros. The Westerlands touch the Sunset Sea, are shielded by high hills to the east, and are located close to the Ironborn to the north. However, only the Riverlands and the Reach touch the Westerlands territory. The land itself is full of rolling plains, rugged hills, craggy shorelines, misty dales, blue lakes, broadleaf forests that have a variety of animals for hunting, sparkling rivers, fertile fields, and much more flatland in the southern area. There are also caves and wooded hills that turn and twist to reveal treasures deep beneath the earth, which is a massive understatement. The Westerlands are full of areas that pour out silver and gold in large quantities. Some of the notable mines in the Westerlands are the Golden Tooth, Castamere, Nuns Deep, Pendrick Hills, and Casterly Rock, but I'll get into those later. Throughout the Westerlands history, settlements built near ore mines would become ghost towns when the mine finally dried up. The men of the Westerlands are known as Westermen, and the surname for their bastards of noble origin is Hill. But before the coming of the first Westermen, which were the first men, the Westerlands in Westeros was occupied by the Children of the Forest and the Giants. Specifically in the Westerlands, the woods were the home of the Children of the Forest, and the Giants lived in the hills of this area. Maesters have reported that giant bones can still be found in the hills from time to time. But as we know, the first men came to Westeros during the Dawn Age via the Arm of Dorne, and began to fight with the Children. As the first men moved up through Westeros, they came to the Westerlands and began to cut down the forests, make roads through the hills where the Giants lived, and plow the fields. The Children of the Forest soon vanished into the hollow hills, the deep woods, and the far north when they realized they were no match for the weapons of the first men. They began to retreat as the first men spread across the west, building farms and villages, forts, and then stone castles. Finally, even the Giants could not withstand the intruders and disappeared. Like many areas of Westeros, the first men that settled began to accumulate power and make themselves into lords and petty kings. Lots and lots of fighting petty kings. Maesters claim many of the great houses in this area trace their roots back to the Dawn Age of the first men, such as the Plums, Brooms, Foots, and Hawthorns sprang up during this time. In the Dawn Age, and really even now, the Ironborn were an issue for the coastal first men in the Westerlands, so it was lucky the Farmans of Fair Isle defended the western coast during the Dawn Age against the Ironborn with their longships. The Rains of Castamere, you know from that famous song, also existed in the Dawn Age. They made an incredibly rich system of tunnels, caves, and mines as their own subterranean seat that would one day really screw them over. The Greenfields made a timber castle built entirely of weirwood they called Bower at the time, but now is just called Greenfield. The Westerlings built their castle, the crag, above the waves. Then there are the Westerland houses that rose up from legendary heroes who are still talked about in this region to this day. There are the Moorlands who came from Pate the Plowman, the Yews from the Blind Bowman, Alan O the Oak, the Baneforts from the Hooded Man, and the Craighhalls from Crake the Boar Killer. However, as powerful as those families were, the greatest lords in this region were the Casterlys of the Rock. Their seat was located beside the Sunset Sea and was built of colossal stone. And because I love a good story, there is a legend of the first Casterly Lord. So the first Casterly Lord was Carlos, son of Castor, a huntsman who lived in a village near to where Lannisport would one day be built. Carlos hunted a lion when it began to prey on the village's sheep. Armed with only a spear, he tracked it to its den, the cave in the base of the rock, and killed the lion and his mate. However, the huntsman had a heart and decided not to kill their newborn cubs, because they were going to do great without their parents. But this act of mercy, though really was it, pleased the old gods, as this was before the Seven came to Westeros, and legend states the gods sent a sudden shaft of sunlight deep into the cave. Carlos looked upon where the light shone, and in the stony walls he saw the gleam of gold, a vein that was reported to be as thick as a man's waist. Again, because it is a halfway epic story, the maesters question whether it's true, but I'm going with it because the gods totally reward people all the time for doing good deeds in the world of ice and fire. Soon Carlos, or someone in his family, mined the gold in the rock, moved into the mine, and fortified the cave entrance so no one could take his precious. The Casterlys continued to live in the cave, and over the centuries they went deeper and deeper, mining the gold, tunneling, creating stairways, galleries, halls, and basically a pretty awesome home. Finally, their creation of carved gigantic stone would dwarf every castle in Westeros. What is interesting about the Casterlys is despite this great wealth, power, and impressive home, they were never kings. They just remained the richest lords in all of Westeros and most powerful lords in the Westerlands for hundreds of years, until the Age of Heroes, and didn't want the title. Big deal in the Dawn Age. And of course, because all good things come to an end, during the Age of Heroes, they got screwed. So during the Age of Heroes, Lan the Clever, a golden-haired pretty boy, came to the Westerlands. This rogue has a few supposed origins. Some say he was an Andal adventurer from across the Narrow Sea who came to the Westerlands, though the Andals coming to Westeros was a millennia in the future from when he showed up, or less depending on who you talk to. But regardless, the Andals were a long way from coming to Westeros. Then there's the theory he was a bastard of Rowan Goldtree or Floris the Fox, both legendary daughters of Garth Greenhand, the mythical High King of the First Men. Of course, the favorite origin story in the Westerlands is that Lan tricked Garth Greenhand and posed as one of his sons. Given that guy had a lot of kids, he wouldn't recognize Lan wasn't one of them, which is sort of creepy and makes you think how much that actually happened. You know, if it actually happened. But anyways, in this story, he poses as Garth's son and makes off with part of the inheritance that belonged to Garth's children. Nice. Trust me, this guy gets worse, just wait for it. Regardless of his origin, during the Age of Heroes, Lan somehow tricked the Casterlys out of their castle, and he took over the rock. The Maesters have many theories on how Lan accomplished this, but the popular theory is that the rogue found a secret passage in the rock that was so narrow, he had to go in naked and covered in butter. Man, did he really want that home? Can you imagine the bugs? That's just gross. Once, all naked and buttered up, Lan got inside the rock. He went what I can only describe as full asshole. Once in the castle, this jerk would howl in the darkness like a demon, which convinced the Casterlys that the rock was haunted by a creature that would never let them live in peace. He'd also steal treasures from one brother and put it in another area, rigged various snares and deadfalls. Yeah, he made traps consisting of heavy weight, positioned to fall on people, and trap falls. He's an asshole. He also would whisper threats in the ears of sleeping Casterlys because every day is April Fool's Day when you're Lan. Finally, his good deeds caused the Casterlys to be suspicious and at each other's throats. Of course, there's other versions of the story that really don't make him look any better. In another version, he smuggles a pride of lions inside, which kills and eats, maybe not in that order, the Lord of the Rock and his sons. And then Lan gets it on with Lord Casterly's wife and daughters. You know, the grieving family members of the people he just killed with lions. I'm just assuming he's the type of guy to force orgies with the mom and daughters. Just throwing that out there. This isn't helped by another version of the story where Lan steals in night after night and rapes the Casterly women. Yeah, he just sneaks in and had, quote, his way with the Casterly maidens whilst they slept. Like, holy hell, dude, that is dark. Surprise, in 9 months the maids all gave birth to golden-haired children while claiming they had no knowledge of ever having sex. And we know how precious a woman's virtue was in that time, so good job, Lan. Yes, psychopath. Also, to add to his great reputation, he stole gold from the sun to brighten his curly hair, so obviously he's a serial thief. Honestly, the nicest version of the story is Lan just flooded the rock with rats, mice, and other vermin and ran the Casterlys out of their home. Yeah, that's the nice version. In this case, I'm actually glad the Maesters have a much more tame version of what they think happened. An Archmaester believes that Lan was actually a retainer or a household guard who got Lord Casterly's daughter, or daughters, pregnant. Since they're assuming Lord Casterly had no sons when he died, the rock passed to a daughter and therefore Lan. But really, the Maesters have no idea which is the most true, and honestly, I'm hoping for the last one, and that the daughter consented to it, and that Lan wasn't the total crazy he's painted to be. Genius, but crazy. So, during the Age of Heroes, the Casterlys mysteriously disappeared, maybe chopped into pieces by the serial killer Lan, and the Lannisters, as they became known as, appeared to rule in their place along with large areas of the Westerlands. Interestingly, given Lan's apparent need for things, he never claimed or called himself a king, which was definitely the thing to do back then. After he died, he would be considered a king, but not during his actual lifetime. Instead, Lan remained ruling the Rock as Lord until the age of 312. In that time, he managed to sire 100 graceful, lean, fair-in-the-face daughters, and 100 brave sons, all with hair as golden as the sun. The histories of the Rock and Westerlands hint that the early Lannisters were really fertile. Actually, the Lannisters are still pretty fertile. So the early Lannisters were popping out so many babies that within a few generations, Lan's descendants could no longer be contained by the Rock. Instead of making the Rock bigger by digging, the lesser branches of the house went to make their home in a village a mile away. The sons and daughters of these lesser branches of House Lannister picked this area for its closeness to the Rock, but also because the sea had an abundance of fish, a fantastic natural harbor, and fertile land. This village grew quickly into a city named Lannisport, and the Lannisters of Lannisport picked a really great spot. Lannisport would become the second biggest city in Westeros. Old Town would beat it, before the Andals ever arrived, and ships from every corner of the world would sail to the western coast to trade at Lannisport. This trade made the Lannisters of Lannisport insanely rich, and with those riches, they built great walls around their city to defend it. Cough, Ironborn. In part 2 of the Westerlands, I'll talk about the first true Lannister king, the Andals' arrival, and how the Westerlands dealt with it. Thanks for watching, please like the video and come back for more history videos.